They didn't stop him at the front door. They didn't ask for his ID like they did mine. Same funeral, same family, but somehow I was the one they asked, "Can we help you, sir?" And I wonder what part of me looked like I didn't belong at my own mother's funeral. The sky was that heavy kind of gray that sits low over your shoulders, like grief made visible. The chapel was already half full when I arrived, hands tucked in the pockets of a black wool coat too old to look sharp but too faithful to leave behind. Inside, people spoke in soft, strained tones, voices hushed like they were afraid to wake her. I nodded politely to cousins I hadn't seen in years, their eyes lingering a second too long. My father sat in the front pew, shoulders drawn in tight. When he looked up and saw me, something passed through his face, a flicker of relief, maybe, or just exhaustion with a different name. I sat beside him in silence. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Then came the moment I had tried not to think about for 6 years. The doors at the back of the chapel creaked open, and I turned. She stepped in first, Celeste, dressed in a black dress that cost more than my monthly rent. On her arm was my brother, Tyrone. My baby brother. They didn't look for me in the crowd. They weren't expecting me here. But when Tyrone saw who I was sitting beside, when he saw Angela's hand resting gently on my knee, his face changed. Just slightly. But enough. And that's when I knew, today wasn't just about laying Mama to rest. It was about what the living had left buried. I met Celeste Monroe on a Tuesday. Not the kind of Tuesday you remember for anything particular, just gray enough, just quiet enough. I had gone to the VA clinic for a follow-up. Still on crutches back then. They squeaked with every other step down the hall. I hated that sound. She was seated at the front desk, typing with the kind of focus people carry when they've trained themselves not to feel too much. She wore blue scrubs and had a lanyard with too many keys. Her voice was soft when she called my name, but her eyes were steady. The kind that don't flinch when they land on someone walking like me. We didn't speak much that day, but she remembered to ask how I liked my coffee when she handed me a paper cup from the vending machine. I said black, no sugar. She nodded, like she already knew. The next time I came in, she remembered that too. A tiny thing. But after all the things that had been forgotten, appointments, medals, people's patience, being remembered felt heavier than I expected. I was living alone then, in a basement unit with low ceilings and a single window that caught morning light for maybe an hour. The rent was manageable, which meant the heat was not. Nights were loud with pipes clanking and the wind scratching at the glass. I told no one I talked to walls some evenings, just to hear a voice echo back. Celeste showed up in small ways first. A smile at check-in. A quick chat about books left on the waiting room shelf. She was sharp, but never sharp-tongued. She had that thing where she waited an extra beat before speaking, like she weighed her words the way soldiers do their steps on foreign ground. Eventually, she asked if I wanted to join the Thursday support group. No pressure, she said. I said no the first 3 times. Then I showed up anyway. She wasn't in the group, but she brought the coffee. Sat in the back corner during the sessions, never spoke, just listened. I noticed that. One evening, she walked with me to the bus stop. The wind cut sideways that night. I offered her my scarf, but she said she was fine. Still, she didn't leave. We stood there in silence for 10, maybe 15 minutes. When my bus came, she didn't say goodbye, just gave a small wave and walked back toward the clinic, her braid tucked inside her coat. I told Tyrone about her the next week. He was crashing on my couch again, between jobs, like always. He laughed, said I finally found someone who looked past the limp. I didn't say anything. He slapped my shoulder and said, "You deserve a little soft in your life, big bro." That night, I found her name saved in my phone, even though I hadn't typed it in. Just the letter C, and the number from the clinic. I smiled at it, then put the phone face down and turned off the light. There are moments when life doesn't tell you what's beginning. You only know when it ends. And back then, I had no idea that Tuesday would be the start of something I couldn't keep. The porch light was out again. I remember that, not because it mattered much, but because I had meant to fix it for days. The bulb had been flickering, like it couldn't make up its mind, then one night it just gave up. I reached the front steps slower than usual. My knee had been acting up. Rain earlier in the day had left a dampness in the wood, and I held the railing a second longer than I needed to. Inside, the apartment was quiet. No music, no television. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick from the old wall clock Celeste had insisted on keeping. I slipped off my boots, left them by the door. One leaned too far and fell, the thud echoing across the hallway like a door closing somewhere else. I set the takeout bag on the counter. Chicken and greens from the place near the VA, her favorite. I'd stopped to grab it after a long shift, thinking we'd eat late, maybe talk a little. The kind of small, tired ritual that makes a home feel lived in. Her coat wasn't on the hook. That's the first thing I noticed. Then the second, a glass of red wine on the table, barely touched. And the third, the one I still remember without meaning to, 2 forks in the sink. One clean. One not. I stood in the doorway to the living room, letting my eyes adjust. The curtains were drawn, but a thin strip of light from the street lamp outside cut across the couch. There were papers on the coffee table. A scarf draped across the armrest. Tyrone's scarf. I didn't call out. I don't know why. My hand brushed the wall where we kept the thermostat. I hadn't planned to touch it. Just needed something to do. Something to hold on to. The hallway to the bedroom was dark. I walked slow. Slower than I had on crutches. The door was slightly open, just enough to catch movement, a shadow shifting behind fabric. A sound, soft but unmistakable. Not a word. Not a laugh. Just breath, drawn in too sharply to be anything else. I didn't step inside. Didn't knock. Didn't speak. I turned. Walked back out the hallway, careful not to let my steps sound too much like anything. In the kitchen, I grabbed the car keys off the hook. The good pair, the one she always said made too much noise when they jangled in my pocket. Outside, the air had dropped 10 degrees. My breath hung in front of me like smoke. I didn't look back at the window. Didn't wonder if anyone was watching. I drove for a long time without music. Just the rhythm of the road and the weight of silence. That night, something left me. Not all at once. Not in anger. Just quietly. Like how a porch light flickers, then goes out. The sunrise caught me somewhere outside Richmond, pulled low across the horizon like someone had drawn it on with tired hands. I hadn't slept. Gas station coffee sat cooling in the cup holder, untouched. I'd been driving since before midnight, a slow southbound drift that had no destination. Just away. When I reached the county line, I pulled over near a small church with peeling white paint and a gravel parking lot. The kind of place where you don't have to explain your silence. I sat there with the engine off, watching the breeze push a paper cup across the lot. Didn't get out. Didn't need to. I didn't call anyone. Not Eleanor. Not even the VA. I told myself I'd take a week off, maybe two. Just time to clear my head. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't going back. Not to that apartment. Not to that woman. Not to that betrayal that sat in my chest like a dull weight pressing against bone. By noon, I'd found a motel off Route 58. One story, brick red, the kind where the air conditioner rattles even when it's off. I paid cash. The clerk didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key and pointed toward the end of the row. Room 112. Inside, the curtains were heavy and drawn. The bedspread had a faded geometric pattern that reminded me of something from childhood, someone's grandma's living room maybe. I put my duffel bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, palms pressed together like I was bracing for something that never quite hit. The television stayed off. The mirror above the dresser caught the light just enough to reflect the curve of my shoulders, hunched and still. I didn't unpack. Didn't move for hours. Just sat there, like the room was holding its breath with me. That evening, I walked across the street to a diner. Ordered a grilled cheese and soup. The waitress was maybe 50, with silver at her temples and a voice that cracked when she called out orders. She didn't ask my name. Didn't ask where I came from. Just refilled my coffee 3 times and left a paper napkin beside the check that said, "Safe travels." I folded it once, then again, and slid it into my wallet next to my old military ID. The ID was creased now, edges soft, photo faded. The face in it looked sharper, more certain. But that man, he hadn't yet been disappointed by the people he trusted most. Back in the motel room, I turned on the ceiling fan. The blades wobbled, casting slow shadows across the walls. I lay down on top of the covers, not bothering with the pillows. One hand rested on my chest. The other hung off the side of the bed, fingertips brushing the carpet. I stayed like that for a long time, eyes open, staring at nothing. Outside, trucks passed on the highway every few minutes, headlights flashing across the blinds like ghosts refusing to settle. I didn't cry. Didn't speak. Didn't move. But something shifted inside me that night, quiet, like a door closing. Not slammed. Just shut. Firmly. Finally. And in that silence, I made a decision. I would start again. Somewhere no one knew my name. Not even me. The job came through a friend of a friend, no questions asked. A nonprofit in Chicago was looking for someone with logistics experience, preferably military. I didn't have much else to offer at the time, so I sent a short email, skipped the cover letter. A week later, they called. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and deliberate. Said her name was Dr. Angela Reed. Said the role wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. I said I didn't need glamorous. I just needed steady. I arrived in the city on a Wednesday. The air felt different. Not cleaner, just heavier. The kind of weight that made you walk slower, notice your steps more. The office was tucked above a community library on the south side, 2 flights of creaky stairs and a door with no sign. Just a number in chipped brass, 204. Angela met me in the hallway. She wasn't what I expected. Tall, yes, but not in the way that made you look up, more in the way that made you straighten your spine when you stood near her. Her hair was pulled back, glasses perched low on her nose, and her voice had a stillness to it. Not quiet, exactly. Just anchored. She didn't ask much during that first meeting. Just listened. Offered water in a mug that didn't match the rest. I noticed the chip on its rim and how carefully she placed it in front of me, like even a flawed thing deserved to be handled right. The work was simple at first, scheduling van pickups for veterans with mobility issues, coordinating appointments, filing grant paperwork. Things that didn't ask too much of me. I arrived early, left late. Ate lunch at my desk, mostly in silence. She never pushed. Just nodded when I passed her office, sometimes with a look that felt more like understanding than permission. One day, I forgot to eat. It had been a long morning, phone lines down, driver called out sick. I was scanning invoices when she came by and placed a sandwich on my desk. No comment. Just left it there beside the keyboard. Turkey and cheese. No mayo. I never told her I didn't like mayo. That evening, as I locked up the front door, I saw her waiting across the street. No coat, just a scarf wrapped twice in hands tucked into her sleeves. She didn't wave. Just stood there, letting the wind push gently at the hem of her sweater. "Walk with me," she asked, when I crossed over. I nodded. We didn't speak much. Just walked the long loop around the park while street lamps blinked on, one by one. Her pace matched mine without trying. Her shoes made no sound on the gravel. When we reached the corner, she turned to face me fully. "You don't have to say what happened," she said. "But I hope you know it's not the only thing about you." I looked down, at the crack in the pavement between us. My hands were in my pockets, fingers curled tight around nothing. I didn't speak. She didn't ask me to. That's how it started. Not with fireworks. Not with promises. Just two people moving through the same stretch of quiet, not expecting to be seen, but seen anyway. And slowly, not all at once, I felt something in me shift. Not like a wound closing. More like a window opening, just a little, just enough to let the air in. The church hadn't changed much. Same brick walls, same faded hymnals, same uneven step near the front entrance that Mama always warned folks about. The parking lot was already filling when Angela and I arrived, the morning light stretching long across the pavement, soft and thin like it didn't want to disturb anyone. Angela wore gray. Not black. Said she didn't believe grief had to dress a certain way. I didn't argue. Her hand found mine just before we stepped inside, a quiet squeeze. Not for comfort, not for show. Just there. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, starch, and silence. I spotted cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, neighbors I thought had moved away. Everyone looked older, not just in their faces, but in the way they moved, like time had added weight to their shoulders instead of years. Eleanor's casket sat beneath a spray of lilies, her photo just beside it, one from her church directory, the one where she wore the blue blouse with the pearl buttons. I felt my jaw tighten. Not from holding anything back. Just from trying to stand straight. Angela guided me gently toward the front pew, where Thomas Carter sat alone, hands clasped in his lap, eyes fixed ahead. He didn't look over when I sat beside him. Just exhaled, slow, and nodded once. That was enough. Then the doors opened behind us. There was no announcement. Just the hush that rolled through the sanctuary, as if the room itself had taken a breath. I turned, and there he was. Tyrone Carter. In a fitted black suit, tie neat, shoes polished. Celeste Munro beside him, in a dress so sleek it looked more like a statement than respect. Her hair was pinned up, her heels too high for a funeral. She scanned the crowd like she expected someone to wave. They walked the aisle slow, arms linked. Tyrone's eyes brushed past me once, then again, slower the second time. Recognition came late, and when it did, it sat heavy on his face. Not shame. Not guilt. Just that shift in a man's posture when he realizes something's no longer his to carry. They took seats on the opposite side. Not the back row, but not the front either. Close enough to be seen. Far enough not to belong. Angela leaned slightly toward me. "Want to step outside?" she whispered. I shook my head. My hand stayed folded, resting on my knee, but one finger tapped, barely, a rhythm no one else could hear. The pastor's voice broke the stillness. Words about life, about faith, about how Eleanor had baked too much and worried too often. People laughed. Softly. Then cried. Softer still. But I didn't move. Not when they sang. Not when the choir stood. Not even when Celeste dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief that didn't look used. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on a point just above the flowers, where the morning light hit the edge of the pulpit. And in that quiet, I understood this wasn't a place for reuniting. It was a place for revealing. And not everything revealed needed to be spoken aloud. The reception was held at the old fellowship hall behind the church. Same linoleum floors, same folding chairs, same smell of sweet tea and overcooked green beans. People stood in small clusters, balancing paper plates and paper grief, trading memories like old coins. Angela and I kept close to the far wall, near the table where Eleanor's favorite peach cobbler sat untouched. I wasn't hungry. Neither was she. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, steadying me more than I'd admit. Tyrone approached just after the third wave of guests had cleared out. He wasn't alone. Celeste trailed behind, one hand wrapped around her purse strap so tight her knuckles showed through. Tyrone had that kind of smile that tried too hard to land softly. Didn't reach his eyes. "Malcolm," he said, voice low, polite. I didn't answer. Angela did. She stepped forward slightly, placing herself between us, though not in a way anyone else would have noticed. Her tone was smooth, formal. "You must be Tyrone," she said. "I've heard your name." Celeste tilted her head. "And you are?" Angela didn't blink. "Dr. Angela Reed. Malcolm's partner. I run the Reed Foundation. We specialize in post-service reintegration and ethical investment partnerships." Tyrone's mouth opened, then closed. Just for a second, the floor shifted under his posture. He nodded, too slow, too cautious. "You Reed Foundation," he said, voice thinner now. "You're the one who blocked our grant application last year. Our firm, CJM Equity, we submitted for your Veteran Accelerator." Angela didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She just looked at him like someone might look at a wall that didn't hold the weight it promised. "Yes," she said. "Your financial disclosures raised some concerns. I'm sure you understand." Celeste looked between us, her expression brittle. "You knew?" Angela gave a soft shrug. "I did. Eventually. I hadn't spoken yet. Still hadn't moved. My hands were in my pockets, thumbs brushing the worn seam near the edge. I watched Tyrone's collar shift, his gaze flick down, then away. Celeste's eyes were darker than I remembered. He cleared his throat. We were just trying to build something. Angela nodded once. Then you should have built it clean. He started to say something else, maybe a defense, maybe a plea, but Angela turned to me, not with urgency, but with a quiet invitation. Want some air? She asked. I gave Tyrone one long look. No heat. No weight. Just a space between two people who used to share a last name without sharing the same ground. Then I turned and followed Angela out the side door. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the gravel. I felt the breeze catch the back of my neck as we stepped into the light. Some things don't need to be answered. They just need to be seen. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The sky had turned that soft kind of blue you only get near dusk, like the day was folding itself up gently, not wanting to leave too loud. Angela and I stood by the side of the church, the gravel crunching beneath our shoes as the last of the guests made their way out. The hum of conversation was gone now. Just wind and footsteps and the slow thud of car doors closing. Thomas Carter came out last, his shoulders squared in that way older men carry grief, like it's something you tuck under your arm, not because it's light, but because it's yours. He nodded to Angela, then to me, and made his way toward the passenger side of a sedan waiting near the curb. I watched him pause before getting in, his hand resting a little longer on the door handle. Then he disappeared inside, and the car eased away. Angela didn't speak. She didn't need to. I took a slow breath and looked back at the church. The flowers by the casket had been packed up. The framed photo of Eleanor, still smiling in that blue blouse, sat propped on a table by the exit. I walked over to it, one step at a time, and stood there for a while. No one else around. No one asking anything of me. Just her, looking back. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper I hadn't shown anyone. A letter. One I'd written months ago, when the weight of what Tyrone and Celeste did still pressed hard across my chest at night. I'd never mailed it. Never even signed it. Just kept it, tucked deep in a drawer back home, until this morning. I unfolded it slowly. The creases had worn soft. I looked at the words, sharp in places, small in others, then folded it again. Once. Twice. Then I walked to the side garden Eleanor used to tend after Sunday service, when most folks had already left and the sun hit the brick wall just right. I set the letter down between the roots of the rosebush she loved. Pressed a bit of soil over it. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to let it stay. Angela came up beside me. Her hand brushed mine. I didn't forgive them for them, I said. My voice was steady, but low. I just didn't want to keep carrying them with me. She nodded. Didn't say a word. We stood there a while longer, the wind soft against our backs. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang faintly, 3 slow notes, then stillness. And in that stillness, Malcolm Carter, once a soldier, once a brother, once a man shattered by silence, let something go. Not all at once. Just enough to make space for the next step. Sometimes, letting go isn't loud. Sometimes, it's the quietest thing you ever do. Sometimes, the deepest kind of healing doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from walking away without needing the last word. Through Malcolm Carter's journey, from betrayal and silence, to standing beside the woman who saw his worth without needing a backstory, we're reminded that forgiveness is not about excusing the past. It's about refusing to carry its weight into the future. When Malcolm buried that letter beneath his mother's rosebush, he wasn't letting Tyrone or Celeste off the hook. He was letting himself breathe again. That quiet act said more than any angry outburst ever could. Not all wars are fought overseas. Some are fought in living rooms, in empty churches, and in the stillness after everyone else has gone home. And sometimes, victory looks like walking away with your dignity, hand in hand with someone who chose to love you where you are. Have you ever let go of something not because they deserved it, but because you did? If Malcolm's story spoke to you, please like this video, share it with someone who's been through their own quiet battles, and subscribe for more stories that honor the strength behind stillness. Because some courage doesn't shout. It just keeps walking.